what can fathers do to make the most meaningful impact on their daughters early on and really affect their whole future? And if I had to distill that down into one most important thing to focus on, I would say think about what kind of child you want to raise. What are they going to look like when they're 12, when they're 18, when they're 25, when they're 60? And what features you want them to have in their just day-to-day experiences, how you want their personality to be like, what you want their reactions to other people, their communication style to be like. That's what you can focus on. There's a theory called observational learning, and it's the idea that our children learn far more simply from watching us and interacting with us than by listening to what we actually say to them and we instruct them verbally. There are some sort of traps that parents sometimes get into in the way that they communicate with their kids that prevent this concept of modeling from teaching your child what you really want them to learn. And we can get into that more.
Welcome to the Daughter Podcast, where fathers become everyday heroes in their daughters' lives. Grow, evolve, and lead with love. Here's your host, Oscar Pena.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Oscar here, your fellow growing girl dad. Back to season 3, as you guys have heard, with an awesome guest that I'm excited to get out to you guys with just a plethora of knowledge on how we as fathers, how parents, but as you guys know, the Daughter Podcast focuses on the father, how we can make the biggest impact in the lives of our daughters. Today, I have Dr. Lindsay Emmerson with us to discuss all the nuances that we normally talk about on the show, but she's bringing in the science and psychology behind it, which is really awesome. Dr. Lindsay, how are you today? And thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Oscar. I'm thrilled to be here. As I mentioned to you before the interview, your season 2 recap was amazing and really just so full of some really critical psychology-based information for parents and dads specifically. So I'm really glad to be here and just continue this pathway of learning for all your listeners.
Well, I'm really glad we connected because as I started to learn from you on Instagram and through your page, I realized that we talk a lot about these concepts that we'll get into today, but it's just coming from the trench that we're working in, right? So that knuckle dragger, like, hey, we're just trying to figure this thing out as we go. But it's good to hear that there is some background to this, that what we're doing, even unknowingly sometimes, is good. And then also what we are doing unknowingly sometimes may not be so good. So it's really cool to get into this and bring the psychology background and your experience into the show. So before I get into everything else, give us a little bit about your background and kind of what got you to sit here in front of the Daughter Podcast.
Sure. So I am a psychologist and a mom of 4. And I am really on a mission to reframe parenting as a learned skill. Because as you mentioned, we're all just out there doing the best we can with the information that we have. But with just a little bit of guidance, you can make very small shifts in your parenting that make a very meaningful impact on your relationship with your child and their lifelong trajectory. And so I'm out here teaching parents, empowering them with psychology-backed strategies to parent with confidence.
It's an interesting concept to think that you kind of said it, like you're taking parenting as a learned skill. I'm sure you can probably relate with your parenting. Well, you probably have better experience with the psychology background, but for us, it's like we're just trying to figure this out, right? And then when you think you have it figured out, the new kid comes in and it's a completely different playbook. And so then you're like, I swear we just did this not too long ago, but this isn't working. I really like the concept of a learned skill. For you guys out there, if you've been listening to the podcast at all, it's literally why I'm sitting in front of Dr. Lindsay and all the other guests that come in here to learn this most important skill that is parenting. And in one of my other episodes, we talked about the concept of coaching, where like when I say coaching, I instantly think of a sport. And it makes perfect sense in the sport. I can't see myself jumping or running or kicking or whatever. So I have this outsider view, the coach, able to give me that learned concept that I need. Never once, even though the social media world is like full of coaches now of all sorts, I never really thought about it in the parenting realm. But that's really where you're getting into with, I don't know if I want to say your new practice, but your new venture. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you use the coaching analogy. I'll often use the analogy of when you learn to drive, you took
Mm,
driver's ed, or if you're a lawyer, you go to law school. And so this concept of training for almost any advanced activity or profession, it's just a built-in thing. Okay, we're going
yeah,
to learn so we can then know how to do this. And so it's almost absurd that we don't have a standard practice of learning how to become a parent. You just walk out of the hospital one day with this infant in a car seat, and they made sure you had the car seat. But they don't ask you, how are you going to respond to that infant when they're crying
right,
for 3 hours tonight? Or in 2 years, when they start talking back to you and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. What are you going to do then?
right.
And when they start breaking curfews when they're teens, throughout life, you run into different obstacles, like you alluded to. It's either the same child meets a new phase and
Mm,
there's a new obstacle, or you have another child and you have 3 daughters. So, not all kids are the same. And so you encounter new obstacles with a new child. And it's this constantly evolving process of parenting. And what I do in my parent coaching is I teach a system called the 5 C's parenting framework. And
mm,
it really focuses on the 5 fundamental principles that you can apply to your parenting and the 5 places you can put that effort that really lead to meaningful change. And so it's really a system. And so it doesn't leave you stuck then wondering, okay, we made it through sleep training, but now we have to potty train. What do we do? And so,
right.
so rather, you just have a way of thinking about your parenting that you can apply to everything you do from 0 to 18.
That would be extremely helpful. It's a system that can be implemented in every phase.
Yes.
And you mentioned something that I've been thinking a lot about the last couple of weeks. Not only are my daughters distinctly different, but they're in distinctly different phases of their lives. So I have a 13-year-old, soon to be 14, and then I have a 10-year-old. So that's 4 years apart. And one thing I found that, and it may change later on, but in the current time, 4 years is a big difference in maturity and thought process and the things that matter to them. And then I have a 5-year-old, and that's a completely different phase, like a crazy person type, right? I always joke around with my wife. I'm like, if an adult did what she does, they're clinically insane. Like they've got to go like, get taken care of. But she's 5. But one thing that, and I can't wait to get into the 5 C's, because one thing that I've just noticed is, as as we alluded to before when you and I talked, there's that authoritarian side and then the authoritative side, which I really want to get into first before we get into the 5 C's. Because some of us, without that playbook, without and what came to my mind as you were talking is parent school, which is weird to say. Like you have lawyer school, you have mechanic school, you have plumber school, like you have all these schools to go learn this thing. But you're right, eh, there's no school for parents. And if you had asked me, let's say 2010, because my daughter was born in 2012, if you had said, hey, you should probably go to parent school, right? I'd be like, no, I don't have time for that. I'll just figure it out when she gets here.
Mhm.
13 years later, I'm like, can we go to parent school? Is there a parent school out there somewhere? So I guess maybe let's get into the 5 C's real quick, and then we'll get into what I'm talking about with using one model, right or wrong, and we can get into that. Using one model as kind of a steeple of like, this is my parenting, this is how I'm gonna do it, and then maybe getting out of that. But let's get into the 5 C's first. There's a company extremely dedicated to restoring the dignity of hard work and the relentless pursuit of greatness. That company is Fuel Hunt, and I am honored and humbled to have them as our sponsor. They have built a community that is all about choosing discipline over comfort and taking pride in the journey because comfort is a slow death. Their clothing isn't just apparel or fight gear, it is our uniform. 100% American made, We Will Hunt clothing is a daily reminder for me and those around me that I am committed to being among the few who truly hunt for their goals. Join the movement today and wear your ambition proudly. Everybody wants to eat, but only a few will hunt. Follow the link in the show notes and use GrillDad at checkout for 10% off your purchase.
Okay, and I just have to acknowledge that Parent School is the best name ever. I wish I could go back in time because my parent coaching membership is called the Amazing Parents Club, and I'll explain why I use that word amazing. But Parent School is just so perfect. I love it. We have to figure out a way to integrate that into the business.
Take it. It's the beauty of knuckle dragger thought process. It's just very simple and straightforward.
Perfect. Well, let me elaborate on where I got that name amazing before we go into the 5 C's, because it sort of flows that way. So you brought up the concept of authoritarian parenting versus authoritative parenting. And that's really the background that helps you to understand then why the 5 C's are so valuable. So authoritarian parenting is one of 4 key parenting styles identified originally by psychologist Diana Baumrind. There have now been decades and decades of psychology research that have validated this concept, that if you look at all parents across cultures, across genders, across time, you find you can distill them into 4 groups. And so these are universal parenting styles. And the terms are different than what you hear in social media, where you're talking about the helicopter parent or the bulldozer parent or whatnot. You can take all those popular terms in social media and you can put them into one of these 4 styles. So there are 4 main parenting styles. 3 of them you don't really want to focus on, and 1 of them you really do. So let me tell you about the 3 that you don't really want to focus on. So authoritarian, that's what a lot of us visualize as sort of the stereotypical father often. So your community is full of dads, and a lot of you can think about how your fathers raised you, and what you might naturally be inclined to do in your fathering tends to be more authoritarian. It's the strict rules, because I said so, very little warmth. So it's high in boundaries, high in expectations, low in warmth. And that's just kind of what we thought for decades was the right thing. Next, we have neglectful parenting. So pretty much any dad listening to this podcast is not going to be a neglectful parent. So we can kind of skim over that one. But there, you're not really having any boundaries, no expectations, and you're really not even paying much attention to your child, not even worrying about the negative attention because you don't even pay much attention to them. Okay, and then more common is permissive parenting. So in permissive parenting, you do not have a lot of boundaries or expectations for your child. Rather, you just focus on the warmth and acceptance and whatever you want, dear. You know, if you want to stay up later tonight, you go right ahead. Oh, you want dessert before dinner? Sure thing. And so just letting the child guide things. And, you know, there are some ways that this can be helpful, maybe learning through experience that if you eat too much sweet, then you get a tummy ache. But permissive parenting is really more of an all-encompassing way of approaching your interactions with your child without boundaries and with lots of warmth. So we don't really want to focus on those 3 styles because decades of research have shown more negative outcomes for kids, both in the short term. So in the behavior at home when they're young, you're finding many more behavioral issues, disruptive behavior, disrespect, more parent-child standoffs. And then going on through the teen years, you find more substance abuse, you find more mental health issues, and that continues into adulthood. And you can even find studies showing the results are slightly different depending on which of those 3 styles you're looking at. I'm just kind of giving an aggregate. So across those 3, you can find studies showing that people who have those parenting styles, their children tend to have worse outcomes going decades later along the lines of profession, well-being, mental health. So many things that we want for our children to go right are not going right for kids who are raised in these styles. So we take those 3 and we say, okay, let's try not to do those. And so then we're left with, well, what do we do? What does the research tell us is the best parenting style? Consistently, the best parenting style when you look at immediate outcomes in terms of how is our family dynamic right now when my child's young? How are they going to do in their turbulent teen years? How are they going to do later on? Are they going to be getting good grades? Are they going to be maximizing their career potential? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be responsible? All of these key outcomes are best for kids who were raised in a household where at least one parent, preferably two,
Mm-hmm.
uses an authoritative parenting style.
Okay.
And what the authoritative parenting style is high in boundaries, high in responsibility, high expectations for your child, paired with high warmth. So
Okay.
that's the difference. The authoritarian style had those expectations, but low warmth. They were cold, they were stern, they were punishment-based, threat-based, shame-based, blame-based. In
Yeah.
authoritative parenting, you're high in warmth. So it's a whole new way of thinking about parenting. You still want your child to be respectful, be responsible, be well behaved, and you
Mm-hmm.
have that expectation of them, but you're going to pair it with interacting with them in a very warm and accepting way. And that, for a lot of people, is like, how is that possible? How do we be nice to them and also get them to behave well?
Right.
Right. And so that's where this concept of teaching parents, guiding parents to use a new mindset, a new framework becomes so important because it's not what some of us experienced growing up. It's not what a lot of us have seen on TV, and it's not what comes naturally all the time because
Mm-hmm.
parenting is stressful and it is frustrating. And you do
Yeah.
have to work hard to intentionally balance those boundaries with the warmth. Now, those terms are terrible, right? Authoritarian makes sense. Authoritative? What? Why did they come
Right.
up with that term? So I just completely scratched that term when I talk to parents. I explain it as I did to you the first time. And then from then on, we call it amazing parenting. And
Okay.
that is why it's called the Amazing Parents Club. But parenting school, that could have been even better.
Well, when you say amazing parenting, that's like when you draw your mission statement or your vision statement. Like that's where I want to get to, right? It's like,
Mhm,
but it's not necessarily fully attainable, but it's something that you want to work towards. And when I listen to you describe the styles,
mhm.
it sounds like amazing parenting is taking some of the things from the other styles, probably not very much
Not
from
neglectful as much, but
the neglectful, right? But you are taking the high standard, high, what do we call it?
expectations.
Expectation,
Yeah.
high
Mhm,
expectation from one,
mhm.
taking the warmth from the other and putting it in there.
Exactly. Exactly. So you're finding the winning combination.
Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing. Now, I'd be remiss not to ask this. Do you see, now obviously you have the data, you have your years of background in this. Is there the possibility that the other styles minus, I just can't see any positive to the neglect, so I'm just going to ignore that one.
Mhm,
But the other styles, based on the personality of the little human you're raising,
mhm.
is there a lean towards one or the other on those, or do you think that lean gets brought into authoritative or amazing parenting, and then you kind of figure that out? Because as you mentioned before, man, it's like it's a whole new playbook every time that a new child comes in.
Mhm, mhm. That's a really interesting question. I like how you worded that, Oscar. So, what I would say is for any child, the research tells us that using an authoritative or amazing parenting style
Mhm.
is going to be the winning approach. But what your question makes me think of is, well, what about the kids who are raised by authoritarian parents or permissive parents and they turn out fine? And so
Right.
that is when some of those nuances of personality and other individual factors are going to come into play, and resilience. And so different kids have different capacities for being resilient.
Mhm.
Overall, kids are fairly resilient. We need to give them a lot of credit. And there are factors that affect their resiliency,
Mhm.
like having a secure attachment bond with one primary caregiver, which
Right.
is more common in an authoritative parenting style.
Right.
But to your point, you can have a resilient kid who's raised by an authoritarian parent, and they can turn out just fine. When we talk about choosing this amazing parenting style over the other styles, we're looking at aggregate data, and we're saying, what are my best odds here?
Mhm.
I don't know what kind of kid I have. I don't know what's going to happen to them in the long run. What's the most likely scenario that they're going to turn out to the best of their ability, right? And
Mhm.
I can help guide them to where I want them to be in 20 years. And the choice is definitely in that case going to be amazing parenting.
That makes a lot of sense. When you talk about authoritarian, it reminds me of like the wait till your dad gets home thing,
Yeah.
right? And then when you talk about the the other one, it just sounds like
Authoritative. Uh-huh.
gentle
Oh,
parenting,
permissive.
permissive, right? Like
Yeah.
super gentle parenting. You figure it out. Um, and there's got to be a fine line. And you're right. Like when you look at when I start to process what you're saying about authoritative parenting,
Mhm.
it's it's allowing them to do some failure,
Mhm.
right? Within reason. You're not going to make decisions on major aspects that I wouldn't that a regular under 18-year-old person wouldn't do. Like, you got to figure those things out. But um we talked a little bit about this before where I was absolutely authoritarian for a long time, and that's where I felt like my place was. Um in I can tell you, especially having been able to have conversations on the show,
Mhm.
in hindsight, of course, right? 2020, I didn't really know how to do this thing, but I knew that providing, right? Providing was going to work, making sure that we had a roof over our head, make sure we have food and diapers and the things that we need. But then after that, it's like, well, then what else do I do? Right. And I'm the authoritarian. I just make sure that there's, and to a fault, I'm like, but I have all these thoughts of greatness for my child. So like expectations are high, and, you know, um, I want to make sure that she gets there and so on and so forth. Now I look at it, I'm like, ugh, I could have done that way better. Right. Again, parent school might have helped. Like I would have been like, oh, okay, so I can have my standard high, but then also have realistic view of that standard. And then I can, you know, love her more or show her more love. I definitely loved her, but show her more love as I'm trying to show her that standard. Um, but when you get a parent, let's say I came to your office, I'm like, hey, listen, I screwed this whole thing up. Like I came in guns hot when my child got here, and I was just like, you know, way out of touch with what realistic expectations were of a, you know, 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old, and then realizing I definitely didn't give her the presence of father that I should have been, that kind of thing. How do you start to coach that person, that dad, into what we would want to be that amazing parent?
Mhm. So, first of all, I would never let them say to themselves, I screwed this up. Because
Failing forward. Let's just say we're failing forward.
yes, you can learn from your experiences for sure by evaluating them. But we are all doing the best that we can in this moment with the knowledge that we have. And really, that is amazing parenting. So, with the parents that coach, I make sure that they know amazing parenting is not perfect parenting. And
Mhm.
even after you learn everything that I can teach you, you're still going to have moments when you do something or say something and you reflect back on it and say, well, that didn't go quite how I wanted.
Yeah.
And that is just being a parent. That's being an amazing parent. It's being any kind of parent. And so with amazing parenting, we are just doing what we can to use the strategies we've learned and help do the best we can every day.
Mm.
I really like, just circling back, I really like how you mentioned the authoritarian dad, and then you mentioned the mom saying, well, wait till your dad gets home.
Right.
So if we look back on kind of a stereotypical 1950s Beaver
Right.
Cleaver home, absolutely the norm was dad is authoritarian, mom is permissive.
Yes.
So no parent in that duo was authoritative.
Mm.
And so it's really been a big change. Families look very different now. And whether you have a single parent, two moms, two dads, a mom and a dad, the way your family looks now, really, as long as one of them is authoritative, then your children have those best research outcomes.
Mm.
But to your question, you can educate parents on what the research says, but it's also really helpful to touch base and say, well, how does it feel when you parent that way? How does it feel when you yell at your child or when
Right.
you take away something that they love without any warning because they did something that surprised you, or any number of situations that they come and they tell you about when you spank your child, any of these things that are very much part of authoritarian parenting? How does that feel to you? Is that the kind of parent that you want to be?
Right.
How would it feel to you if you one day saw your child do that to your grandchild,
Mm.
right? Their child when they're a parent one day. And so you can start doing that kind of thought process and thinking about, well, maybe this isn't the kind of parent that I want to be. And then you can think about, how is it working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they lied to you and you yelled at them, and do they still lie to you? Has that worked? And so
Right.
typically
Yeah.
with the authoritarian style, kids will immediately change and they learn to be on guard with you. They learn to be on the
Right.
lookout. Are they watching? Am I getting punished? Oh, dad's in the room now. And so it changes their whole dynamic with you. And they will, in your presence, often behave the way you want,
Mm.
but it's not them internalizing a value and spreading it across their whole experience. It's not them learning to do that in the long run. So, how's that working as a strategy?
Yeah.
So, if you look at the research, you look at how it feels, and you look at how is it actually working, pretty quickly parents come to realize, okay, there's got to be a better way.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as I mentioned this over and over again, from the trench, still, I've been at the point where we had discussion with my oldest, and she's like, I get anxious when you walk in the room because you're gonna tell me this and you're gonna tell me this, and I'm like, I wasn't even thinking of that, but she did that. She thought that because she just assumed I was gonna get after her for X, Y, Z, and you talked about this in almost in my brain. I started to go into like control, right? Like there's authoritarian and all these things go under it, and one of them showed me that it's the word control. So you over control, and as you mentioned, it's almost like you're making a facade. So like at home, yep, they're controlled, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but simply just to get out of an argument, get out of whatever it is, especially as they get older, I think. I think when they're younger, again, in my experience, it's more of a fear factor, right? Like they may not get to the point like a teenager is yet because they're so young, but they're still on edge because of dad's gonna come home and whatever.
Mhm.
And I know I felt that. So to your point, if you ask me, well, how's that working out for you? How does that feel? I'm like, it literally feels wrong right after, like the moment that a word comes out of my mouth at a certain tone in a certain way, right after I'm already thinking like, gosh, dang it, that's gonna be a therapy session, like for sure. Right. And so it's this constant battle of the way I look at it is a constant battle of using the code that was set into me. And again, I don't disparage my parents. You mentioned it right now. They were doing the best they could with what they had at the time that they had it. Period. Um, but yes, it's instant. Like I will leave the room and sometimes tell my wife, I'm like, I did not want to do that. Like the very moment I did it, it's almost that joke of like it sounded way better in my head before it came out. Um, it's so weird that it does that. I am happy to say that in this growth process, specifically with the show and all the things I get to learn and then implement right away. I'm able to see it before it comes. But before, it wasn't like that, right? Before, it was like almost instant reaction, which I know you're going to get into because of ways that we can practically do things so that we don't get to that point. But it's such a weird thing to now look at it from I mean, inside. But if I step back as I talk to you, and I'm like, oh yeah, authoritarian and authoritative, way different. Before you and I talked, to me, it was like, that sounds really similar, and you're talking to a knuckle dragger. So to me, it's like, I don't know if I can differentiate the two, but it's very clear what you're getting at.
Yeah,
And
as long as we get rid of that term, that authoritative term.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, the thing that I want to get to is not even worry about the term, but those concepts of getting out of the authoritarian
Right.
side.
So how do you do it? How do you
Yes.
actually embody this parenting style? Right. Because it's so easy to say, oh, well, I want to be different and kind
Yeah.
of get what you were just talking about, Oscar, is this concept of turning reactive parenting
Yes.
into intentional parenting. And that's a really key first step in changing your parenting approach. And so first is just kind of acknowledging, oh, okay, there is a better way. I can see this now. And okay, I want to do this. I want to become more intentional in my parenting so that I can be an amazing parent. And then the question is, well, how do I do that? And so that's
Mhm.
that system that I talked about, because I feel like there are a lot of people talking on social media about setting boundaries and being warm. And this is not an entirely new concept, but
Right.
there aren't a lot of people actually telling you exactly how to do that in a way that you can start applying to your daily interactions with your child
Mhm.
and really customizing them to your unique family dynamic. And so that's why I created the 5 C's parenting framework. So literally my husband said to me one day, I know you're talking about writing a book. What you really need to do is come up with like the 6 steps to, or the 10
Right.
key things. And I said, you're right. Like putting a number on it makes it easier to then remember. These
Mhm.
are the things you can repeat it in that order. So it really
Mhm.
becomes internalized as kind of this is the process. And so I thought long and hard about all the strategies that I had been using with my own kids for at that point, I don't know, a decade. And they all, at some point or another, came from my psychology background. So all
Mm.
these core behavioral psychology and cognitive psychology principles, like what I mentioned earlier, just observational learning. That's something I learned about in high school psychology and then in psychology 101 in college. So I'm not talking about things I learned during my PhD program. Very little of that comes into my parent coaching practice.
Mhm.
This is stuff that any parent can learn. So high school, college level psychology stuff. So when you think about these principles and how to apply them to parenting, that's what I'd been doing just in my own parenting practice, just to make my own life more enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure that my kids were on the right trajectory. And so my husband and I had this conversation, and I said, okay, what what are the core areas that parents really need to focus on that I can describe to them easily? And then each strategy I teach them can kind of fall into one of these areas. So I brought it down to 5.
Okay.
So I developed the 5 C's to amazing parenting, because they all start with the letter C. So we've got communication. And this is how you talk to your child
Mm.
and the nonverbal communication that you use with them, and how what you say to them sets expectations for their behavior to help set them up for success.
Okay.
Second is consistency. So again, setting your child up for consistency, for success through consistency. So
Mhm.
things like teaching parents how to establish a really effective bedtime routine and a consistent bedtime so that their child is well rested, because that makes
Mm.
a world of difference. So we talk about sleep, we talk about eating, we talk about daily rhythms, and we talk about your mindset when you interact with your child and doing so in a consistent way. Choices and checkpoints. So these are tied together because it's teaching parents psychology back to developmental stages. So things like Jean Piaget's cognitive stage theory. It
Okay.
sounds very scientific, but it's not. There's some very core age marks. And if you understand what's going on with your child's brain at
Mm.
2 and 7 and 11, then you will be much more empathetic to their behavior and
Right.
you will understand that you need to communicate with them in a different way because their brain does not work the same as you. So a
Yeah.
lot of, I mean, really, until gosh, the Industrial Revolution, people really thought that children were just little adults,
Yeah.
right? And that like everybody thought that. This was mind blowing to really when Piaget came up with this theory to really comprehend that kids' brains are different. And
Mm.
now it's very widely known. People talk
Right.
all the time on social media about your child's prefrontal cortex is still developing until 25. You probably
Mhm.
heard that 10 times this week, and it's true. And it's great that people are aware of that. And really, for men, it can even go on till 30. So, cognitive development is a very real thing. It markedly changes the way that we understand our child, the way that we show up with empathy and patience
Mhm.
for our child. And then the choices part is it also affects the types of choices that you give them. And
Mm.
something as simple as if you're trying to get them dressed in the morning and you have a 2-year-old, you want to say, do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? If you have a 7-year-old, you can say, hey, let's go get dressed. What shirt do you want to wear? So
Mhm.
as simple as providing two good options versus an open-ended question. And it's a small shift in how you communicate with your child that's going to
Yeah.
have a huge impact on the daily experience, right?
Yeah.
Those choices and checkpoints that may have consequences. Now, consequences are that high boundaries, high expectation part of authoritative parenting.
Mhm.
And they are not harsh punishments. So that's where it's different than the authoritarian style. That's not a reactive, oh, how dare you say that? Go to your room.
Mm.
Instead, you and I talked about this in our little chat before the interview.
Mhm.
Instead, it's, well, I told you this had to happen by this time. And
Right.
if it didn't, then you would lose your phone for the night. So now it's this time and that thing didn't happen. So now it's time for the phone to go away. And
Yeah.
it's a pre-established, fair, reasonable consequence that is designed to teach something and to help improve their behavior the next day. So that's how I use consequences. And it depends on the age of the child and the
Of
situation.
course.
There are a lot of really fun psychology theories that go into deciding what consequences to use. So
Mm.
that's a fun one. And then last is, oh, well, actually, let me touch on one more thing about consequences.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned earlier, we talked about how it doesn't feel good to use authoritarian parenting, right?
Mhm.
So I do have to caution people, it doesn't always feel good to use authoritative parenting either.
Yeah.
But you can be an amazing parent and you can say, this is hard. This doesn't feel great. I
Mhm.
don't like having to take away your phone, but I know that it's the right thing. I thought this through. We talked about it ahead of time. I really
Mhm.
think this will help you to learn this. And so I'm going to follow through on that consequence. So amazing parenting isn't always going to feel good. But what
Mhm.
feels good is knowing that there's an intention behind why you're doing what you're doing. And you're
Mhm.
doing it in a teaching way. You're doing it to really help your child, help your relationship, and get them on the right trajectory. So I just wanted to add that to consequences.
Yeah.
And then the final one is check yourself. And this is really kind of a lot of things fall under here, problem solving and coping skills for parents, all sorts of good things. But the core element here is getting intentional and making that
Mm.
choice to treat your child as much as possible in this amazing style, balancing high expectations and high warmth. So
Mm.
those are the 5 C's. So what I train parents in my coaching program to do is when they're going throughout their day, and when they encounter any parenting challenge, or when they have some problem that they need to overcome in their parenting, or when they're just reminding themselves, hey, what kind of parent do I want to be today? They think through, okay, I need to think about communication, consistency, choices and checkpoints, consequences, and check yourself.
Mhm.
And they have all these specific strategies that fall into each of those
Right.
that I teach in my full Better Behavior Blueprint program. But it's those, just understanding those 5 areas that you can really focus on as a parent and make meaningful change. I mean, that's really empowering.
Yeah. I know we talked about this before too, but the check yourself seems so important because I I've gotten to the point where before I interact, especially in a authoritative way,
Mhm.
I've got to check myself. I'm like, what's my energy level? What am I working on already mentally? Because it's easy to get, I don't really like that word, but to get triggered in that moment of, especially with like my older child, right? Because now they are more of a adult. They're talking and they have their own thought process, and they still hold a mirror. I've mentioned this many times in my show. Like they're mirrors, right? They hold these mirrors at us, and there's these things that almost has nothing to do with them, but if they say it or act it or show it, they, reflects back. Um, and so that check yourself, like I almost see these 5 C's in this big circle, and you could essentially move the circle up if you need to do that one first. But for me, that's definitely been a key to being intentional. So intentionally checking to see where I'm at. And there's been times, probably less than I should, but been times where I'll look at my wife, I'm like, can you take care of this? I'm not at mental load at the moment to take care of this. And she's great. She'd be like, yeah, just let me do this.
Perfect.
And so the teamwork thing is a key for, at least for our relationship. But yes, that whole check yourself thing, it is a it is a thing that I think will take us into what your triage plan looks like, because it is ensuring that we deliver the message, not in an authoritarian style, right? Some of us may be used to, but with enough emphasis that there is a certain result. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I would love to share with your listeners this 3-step triage plan that can be helpful for managing any stressful situation.
Yeah.
If it's my child's refusing to put on their shoes, or they just spilled a giant bag of dog food, or
Right.
they just talked back to me and said
Yeah.
no. Or I told them to plug in their iPad and it's not plugged in yet and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
All these stressful situations that come up every day. And with time and reflection, you can look back and say, okay, it really wasn't a big deal. I don't know why I got so upset.
Yeah,
But in
absolutely.
the moment, it feels like a lot.
Yes.
And so to be an intentional parent, there are 3 steps that you can start using today. So the first is to respond. And we're not responding immediately.
Mm.
You're thinking to yourself, you're reminding yourself that you are going to choose to respond rather than react. So
Okay.
it's really making that intentional mindset shift to saying, I'm going to be a responsive, intentional parent,
Mm.
not going to be a reactive, just go to your room, I'm so upset with you,
Right.
or say something, how could you, like, you're always doing any of those
Right.
things that really hurt our children and really change their view of themselves, their self-efficacy, and their confidence. And so we want to avoid that. And so we take a moment, and my favorite technique to pair with this first step is deep breathing. And
Mm.
you can do wonders for your parasympathetic nervous system, which is fighting that fight or flight response and trying to get you to calm back down
Yeah.
so that you can take that beat and really get your frontal lobe back on board, make some good choices. So a deep breath in and a deep breath out, because most of these things, there's no rush. It's
Yeah.
okay
Right.
if the shoes take another second. And sometimes you just need to remind yourself of that. So you take the deep breath and you say, I'm going to choose to respond rather
Yeah.
than react here. So that's
Well,
step one.
let me throw something funny at you there, because I use this model, and just recently my daughter and I were talking, and she gave me this view of me, right? So I take a breath. So I'm not reacting, but my face is reacting. So I take a breath, and she's like, every time that you take a breath, or you're gonna like, or you get upset, you do this certain face when you take a breath. And she's telling me that is prepping her for my reaction. Which I feel like I've gotten better on the reaction side, but guys, like, you guys are out there listening, you can just imagine. I just take a breath, but I'm like, so she's catching that. She's so perceptive that she's catching that, and it almost feels like it's defeating the purpose of taking the breath to not have a reaction. And maybe I'm not reacting, but now she would be reacting to me because she's already seeing me do this thing, and she's like, well, here we are, let's go.
I would reframe that, Oscar. Instead of saying, well, it's kind of ruining the point because now she knows that I'm upset because of the deep breath,
Yeah.
I would reframe that to, hey, I'm not trying to hide my feelings from my child. I'm not trying to make them think that I'm always happy and never
Yeah,
not
right.
upset. Rather, I want to teach my child that life has ups and downs, and we can choose how we respond to that. And hey, here's this really helpful coping skill. I'm going to model it for you. I take a deep breath, and that helps me to respond better
Right.
when I'm a little frustrated. And so it's really pairing strategies. It's making sure that you're taking that moment to respond by using your coping skill, and it's pairing it with modeling, which going
Right.
back to the very beginning of our interview today, that's really the best thing you can do for your child. So you're teaching her, hey, if life gives you lemons one day, rather than going off on somebody, hey,
Right.
why don't you take that deep breath and see if you're able to respond
Yeah.
rather than react?
Yeah, it's very true, and I do, for the record, I do respond much better once I take that breath.
Yeah.
I think it's her perception of my face when I'm taking
Yeah.
that breath that doesn't help her do that, so
Oh,
it's a work in progress, and I
totally, totally.
you know, I just haven't dialed
Oh,
it in yet.
yeah, and depending on what situation you're dealing with, it might need to be 3 or 5 breaths, or sometimes you may need to
Right.
excuse yourself, like, hand it off to your wife, like you said,
Yeah,
or if she's not there, just, "Hey, I'm gonna circle back to this. I just need to step out of the room for a moment to make sure I come
right.
back composed, because you
Yeah, makes
deserve that
sense.
from me."
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean,
Sorry.
if your child's not very young, and as long as they're safe and you can
Of
leave them
course.
for a moment. Yeah, so that's the first step. So respond.
Yep.
The second step is to then teach. And so this is the main difference between amazing parenting and authoritarian
Okay.
parenting. That was more just punishment based. You did this, now this happens. We're coming from a teaching element. So
Mm,
again, we have consequences sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes we have consequences. But the main point here is, what can I teach my child from this experience?
mhm.
And so maybe with the shoes, you're teaching them, hey, I get that you don't want to put your shoes on, and I care about your feelings. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me if you go barefoot to the car. So, okay, thanks for expressing your feelings. Next time, can you just say, is it okay if I don't wear shoes today? And so maybe you're doing like a little social skills training,
Mm,
I call it, where you're teaching them, like, this is a better way to interact. This will make communication easier for you in the future. Let's practice it. And then you have them say back to you, can I not wear shoes today, please? And then you walk to the car barefoot. No big deal.
yeah.
But maybe you live in New York City and you're walking to the bus, and no way you want your child
Right.
walking barefoot, right? So then you're teaching them and you're saying, I know shoes don't always feel good, and I'm sorry about that, but we need your feet to be safe on the way to the bus. And it's not always safe out there barefoot. So we need to put on our shoes now.
Yeah.
Would you like to do that? Or would you like me to help you with that? And so you're holding the boundary. Sometimes you're relaxing it because it's not important. Sometimes you're holding it because it is important. And so you're teaching them, explaining to them at their level. And one really key part for dads in particular in teaching their children this second step of the triage plan is to really be intentional about how your point is coming across,
Mm,
and thinking about your size, your volume,
mm,
your stance. And as men, typically you're going to be bigger, louder, stronger than your child's mom.
right.
And you're definitely going to be bigger, louder, stronger than them.
Right.
And so dads in particular need to be extra conscientious of getting down to their child's level. And maybe with your teen, it's sitting at a table.
Right.
Well, your teen might even be taller than you, but if, if they're not yet, sitting at a table so you're eye to eye with your toddler, it's literally crouching down and being right there with them on the floor.
Yeah.
Thinking about your volume, because it's so much louder than you realize. And the tone, it can come off as harsh or mocking,
Yep.
and to just really bring it back to that idea of bringing that warmth. You can hold a boundary and be warm by really being mindful of your tone, your nonverbal gestures.
Mm,
I just did a podcast episode where I talked about nonverbal gestures. And so putting your hand gently on your child's shoulder, that is great. It is a connection moment. But if you are upset and you put on your hand on the shoulder and you squeeze, that is not a connection
right.
moment.
Yep. Yep.
That is asserting your authority, intimidating
Threatening.
them in that
Right.
fear-based style that we want to stray away from. We want to move to that balance of, these are my expectations, but I can communicate them warmly. And so
Mhm.
for dad, it's really important to think about that tone, your volume, your height, and your physical touch. And so in the teaching element, you're trying to focus on training your child so that they understand, and we have to keep in mind their developmental limitations. So with younger children, you want to use shorter explanations. And if you try once or twice and they're not getting it, then you just say, okay, I understand it doesn't make sense, but we're going to put on those shoes now. And then go back to holding the boundary. Do you want to do it, or would you like me to help you with that?
Yeah.
And so you're communicating. Your one key thing in this teaching step is you're using what's called unconditional positive regard. So this is a concept that psychologist Carl Rogers developed, and he really pioneered this idea of humanistic psychology. So it's people centered, person centered,
Okay.
and we really care for the person and let them know that they are important, that they are valued, that they are accepted. And this concept has now spread far beyond just the client-therapist relationship. And I think it's critical to amazing parenting.
Mm.
And it really boils down to this. When your child is having an unwanted behavior, you can guide them towards a better behavior, but you are separating that behavior from their worth as a person.
Right.
And so it's not, why can't you put your shoes on? Your sister always puts it on right away, right? It's,
Right.
oh, the shoes are tough now, but we really need to work on this together. So we need you to put your shoes on. It's the behavior, it's the shoes, it's not
Right.
you.
Right.
And so whether it's, the shoes or the spill or the talking back, I don't think you meant that to come off so disrespectfully, but it really sounded tough to my ears. Can we try that again? Can you say it more like this? And trying again and just giving them the benefit of the doubt. That they're not trying to be mean. They're not trying to be difficult. Your child's having a hard time. And their brain doesn't yet know how to master that. They don't have perfect communication skills. They don't have full emotion regulation yet. And so it's our job to teach them these things and to do it in a loving, supportive manner so they always know that they are valuable, they are worthwhile, they're a core part of your family that you're always going to consider very meaningful regardless of what their behavior is.
Right.
You can change the behavior. You can work on them with that, but they're always key. And so that really helps them to develop that self-efficacy, that self-confidence that you want and that will help them in the long run. And so that's all tied into the teaching step.
Wow.
I know. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And you can see how it takes so much more intention and so much patience over just, I'm so mad at you. I'm going to tell you that, and I'm going to punish you in this way. Right? It takes so much more, but it feels so much better. And it helps our kids so much more.
That has been the game changer for me, reminding myself, and it's in that check yourself moment, right? Reminding myself of their current phase, like understanding, hey, their prefrontal cortex is not, she's still growing.
Yeah.
She's still learning. And I think a lot of us forget that. I go to work every day, I'm around adults, and it's easy to be like, you should know what you should be doing. It's your job. Like you're an adult. And then we bring that home, and maybe I'm just saying me, right? Like I'll bring that home and be like, what do you mean you don't know what you're doing right now? Right. And it's those comments that end up getting into a worse conversation because, as you mentioned, it makes them feel like they are the problem. And intentionality has been what we're trying to do as fathers with Daughter Podcast and Daughter Community. And it's one of those things that I have to almost verbalize to make sure that it's understood because I probably don't do it very well nonverbal. Meaning I have to say, hey, the problem is this. I'm upset because of the problem, not you. Let's just fix this. Now, it may not sound like that sometimes, right? It's the level of intensity is a little bit higher depending on what the problem is. But in doing so, I've seen results. So again, I'm not doing it perfectly. And you and I, Lindsay, we talked before where it's like, I feel like on a good day, I'm at like 20% of success rate of my actions, right? Like I'm like, all right, 20% probably good today. I wish I could get to 30, but we're working. But even with that little bit of verbalization of saying, hey, this is the problem. This is what we're concerned about. Let's discuss this. Not you. Let's discuss this. Even with that little bit, I've seen that conversation turn, Even if the intensity is not fully like dialed down, I still see it turn to the problem because it's almost like I'm taking the blame away from the person. Is
Mhm.
that track? Like,
Yeah.
and I've seen in my daughter's face like that when I do that, it feels that way. Like, all right, okay, fine. Let's just concentrate on the problem. So I've seen a little success with that, even if I have to physically verbalize it.
I love that. I love how you're articulating that to them. And yeah, I'm sure that it's having a huge impact on them and their sense of self and their relationship with you. A lot of this is just how are our kids going to feel about us in 20 years
Yeah,
when they look back on their childhood? And in 40 years, are they going to still want to be friends with us? Are they going to
right,
be coming to holiday dinners and everything? Are they going to be asking us to babysit their kids?
right.
Whatever relationship you envision with your child, that 20% of the time, which I bet is a lot higher, I bet it's more like 80% of the time, that is benefiting that future relationship with
Yeah.
them.
No, and that's the goal ultimately is to not give them excuses not to come home
Mhm.
and, to be in their lives. And it's something that it's just been I've heard this before where a father's like, "All right, I'm done. They're out of the house." It's like, "No, like you're a dad wants to leave the house. You're a dad once you're gone. Like that memory of you is there.
Mhm.
The memory of you as a father and all the lessons and all the mistakes and all the things that you have done, they stick with your child no matter what stage of life they are. So this is just such an important conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for the practicality of these theories and tools because that is really, at least again for this dude, like practicality is key, right? Like I can, when we're done today, I can take these and go implement right away, and I know that it'll make a difference in our relationship between my daughters and I. Even
Absolutely.
relationship with my wife and I. Like it makes a difference to be able to implement the things that you bring to us today. So
Oh, I'm so
yeah.
happy to do it. Let me tell you the third step because this is
Oh, I
one.
didn't even get to the third step.
I
Let's
know
do
there's
this.
so much in step 2. We haven't even gotten to step
Yeah,
3. So step 3 is one that people often forget. So
as we
far,
did.
yeah, yeah. So far, well, it's funny. This is kind of like a real life correlate here. So
Okay.
we responded,
Yep.
we taught, and then actually time will pass. So that's this is like a real life experience here. So now we're coming back and we're doing the third step, which is monitoring. And so this
Mm,
is where all that teaching is compounded because the next time you're in the same situation, you check in with your child and maybe it goes exactly the same way and you have to repeat yourself, but maybe
mhm,
it goes a little better. And you say, "Hey, you really did a good job using respectful
mm,
words there. I appreciate that. Like, it really makes it so nice for us to communicate." Or, "Oh my gosh, you got your shoes on so quickly this morning. Way to go." So
yeah,
you're using positive reinforcement, which is a key tool for increasing the likelihood of a behavior happening again. So you
yeah.
want to bring a lot of positive reinforcement into your parenting. And it's not false praise. It's not always telling our child they're doing a great job or
Right.
everything's
Yep.
perfect, right? But when you see these moments where they're doing something right, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, it can
Yeah.
be putting their shoes on if that's been something you've had trouble with. When you see those moments, really being intentional about praising them.
Yeah.
And overall, when you look back at your day with your child, you want to have about 80% of your parenting
Mhm.
interactions be neutral, like time for dinner, to positive. Great job putting your shoes on.
Right.
And only 20% should be the, okay, I see you're having a hard time with this. Do you want to do it yourself or do you want me to help? Or any of those teaching moments fall into more of that corrective, negative tone.
Mhm.
So even though you're doing it in a warm way, when your child looks back on the day, they're remembering those, right? They have a negative valence. So you want to make sure that more of your interactions
Yeah.
are, hey, you want to work on that puzzle together now? And so 80% are in the
Yeah.
positive or neutral category. And so in this monitoring step, reinforcement is key. And
Mhm.
the other thing that we'll circle back to again, this really key message of modeling. And so if
Mm.
you want your child to use a respectful tone with you, you need to use it with them.
Yeah.
And that shows them that this is the way that we do things. This is the way
Yeah.
we interact in our family. This is the way I interact with the cashier at the grocery store. This is a consistent way of being, and they see you doing that, and they start to internalize that as a value that they care for.
Yeah. This is such an important step, and this is full circle. We just had this conversation this week. It was a loaded conversation, but my daughter made it a point to say, "You always tell us when there's something not done,
Mhm.
when we did something wrong." She said, "But not when we do the things that you ask us to do, but without being asked." Like, she made it a point to do that, and I think it's so easy to. I don't even want to say ignore that. I just think it's so easy to see the negative stuff all the time, right? When we're talking about chores and the little things that should be done every day, like putting on your shoes, like making your bed. It's so easy to walk in and be like, this isn't done.
Mhm.
But I can tell you, even looking back, I've walked into the room and be like, oh, that's done. Awesome. Close the door, end the conversation. Right. They weren't even around for me to say that. Like I know it was done. I appreciated it, but I didn't verbalize it. And I think that is one of those things that I have literally written down many times to say, as you walk out this door, go find the positives.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us just don't. I don't think it's malicious. I just think we just don't focus on that.
Totally. Or how many times, I mean, it's not just specific to parenting. How many times have you thought, wow, I really like that person's shirt? Or, wow, they have such a pretty smile. How often do you say that? Like,
Oh
can you
yeah,
imagine
absolutely.
if just in life we started being more positive and we started showing other people that we value their choices, their actions? The world would be a better place. And definitely if you do it within your home, your
Right.
family dynamics are going to be better.
Absolutely. No, that's such a. We forgot it, and it's probably the most important point to solidify that relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right.
I love that you made a little note to self because that's where change starts with these small shifts. I'm going to put a little note on
Yep.
the refrigerator, and every morning I'm going to say, okay, today I want to say 10 kind things to a
Yeah.
stranger, or I want to
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
my child, really good work getting these 5 things done.
Right.
And then you
Yeah.
do it, you do it, and you circle back at dinner. You say, hey guys, who was thankful for something today?
Yeah.
Who showed somebody kindness today? If any of these virtues that you value, you follow up on them and you
Right.
talk about them, and your children realize, hey, these are important and they make life better. Oh,
Yeah.
there's my alarm again.
So you mean we have to model everything? Oh, so difficult.
Yes, yes. And I need to make a note to self to turn off my alarms during interviews.
Lizzie,
Oh.
it's been great. I'm sure someone is in need of your expertise. Um, please help us find you and your work and how we can find those practical tools to be able to be better parents every single day.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I would love to share some resources. So I am on social media at Dr. Lindsay Emmerson, and my website is drlindsayemmerson.com. And I have a really special event coming up right after this episode will probably release. And so anybody who wants to get a deeper dive into this concept of shifting from reactive to intentional parenting, I would recommend signing up for this free live workshop I'm doing. And you can register today at drlindsayemmerson.com/reset. And even if you catch this episode after the workshop is complete, then don't worry because I'll also send you a recording.
And we'll have all of those links in the show notes for you guys to be able to quickly get to Dr. Emerson's work. Dr. Emerson, again, Dr. Lindsay, I know you said this earlier. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your willingness to get back on here and give our listeners the practicality of being a better parent every single day. I just can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me, Oscar. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and keep up the good work on your amazing parenting journey.
Thank you very much. It is a work in progress, but we'll keep going on it. All right, for you guys out there, hope you guys got a lot out of this episode. If not, go back to the beginning, listen to it again, because I know I will. We will have all the links down below. Remember to go to daughterpodcast.com. You'll also find the episode there and all the other information that comes out for the daughter community. Until then, we'll see you all next time. Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing.